Hello, Data Storytellers. So this is an episode I've been looking forward to. I think Elena and I connected last week, maybe the week before, and quickly we had a conversation, just sharing some takes on what's happening out there in the enterprise AI transformation world, which is a very dynamic space today. A lot is happening. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of signal as well. So our goal today will be to bring as much signal into the conversation as possible. So without further ado, Elena, welcome on the show.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here. Definitely a lot of interesting topics. And last I had the chance to read your recent article, like a summary of your interviews and observations, and share it with many people. So people really got excited. So they can totally relate to your experience.
Oh, I appreciate it. I was glad to hear. Actually, I still haven't published that article on. I still owe some of my advisory board members just the fact that I should post it with some commentary. It was actually one of our advisory board members, Elena Alikhachkina, who said, "Hey, Laz, can I just share it, please?" I'm sure, go ahead. And then I was happy to hear back from you. Then I actually sent it to my team. So I'm glad it came from the heart, if you will, in the sense of, okay, I'm having these conversations, these great interviews, we're working on all these cool projects with these data and analytics and innovation and digital transformation leaders and some of the biggest and best companies in the world. But I want to capture something to just share with the general public, so to say. So we had this idea of creating the AI Executive Series, where basically there's a publication there, some written pieces, but also interviews with people who have been leading different transformations relating to technology and data and digital transformation and now AI, and just kind of highlight what works and what doesn't work and explore some journeys and help people make better decisions and also just have fun while we're doing it. So when you reached out, we had a quick call and we set this call up. And I remember we actually are going to start with a very hot topic, which is agentic AI. I think this is one of those areas where there's just a ton of noise, but also so many cool things happening. So I want to explore that from a data perspective, but I think you told me when we first spoke that, hey, wait a second, Laz. I think that when we look at this AI transformation, the data transformation might not be the right historical context. That's all I'm going to say. We're going to reveal what we're going to talk about, but I read this article. Actually, I just went through this article that you wrote. You just sent it today, and I was looking forward to the podcast. I skimmed it, and immediately I was like, okay, I'm not going to read this because I want to hear it from Elena. It was a really cool angle, which is when we think about data foundations for agentic AI. And actually, a lot of our members are working on that too, rolling out a bunch of these agentic AI solutions. And we actually have an upcoming masterclass where we will talk about that from different aspects, from an AI strategy point of view, from a data foundations point of view, from a stakeholder management point of view, from an operationalization point of view. But the data foundations are so critical. And with that, your take was that you're actually building data foundations for a different audience now, so to say. And I'm using audience in quotation. So can you just unpack that idea a little bit, because I find it fascinating?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me actually tell you why I personally like agentic, right? So I love it because this actually helps to go into the business deeply. So this actually helps to replicate the business process, right? So the way how I see the agentic is helping to speed up the process, helping to solve the task. And I'm a big believer, as close we to the task, as close we to the action, there is a greater story for success, right? So this is why I'm like a believer into agentic approach, right? So of course it's still gonna evolve, right? But my story today was actually about thinking in a way how we have been doing our data management for years, right? Building the data teams, building analytics teams, and we have been building our teams around different customers or audiences, as you said, right? So the primary audience is usually business people, right? So the business people or data analysts who requires access to the data, right? And we provide them databases, we provide them data lakes, and everything, right? So then we started building access to digital applications, to different apps, right? So you want to drive personalization, you attach to your data lake, now you can drive personalization, right? But if agents gonna be reproducing the business processes, so they could become the primary customer in the future, the primary audience, which completely changing a lot. It's changing a lot in terms of how we should be organizing data, how the data management should be happening, what type of checks we should be putting, through the entire the process, right? Plus, it also changes entire concept of the governance, because governance is not becoming like a theoretical concept anymore, or your metadata is not the theoretical kind of concept, right? So your metadata is almost becoming like a customer experience for your new customer, which is your agent, right? So I honestly believe we're going to see it sooner than we think, right? But how we're going to change this approach to data management? We need to change it now.
I have so many questions. This is like, I'm honestly, this might be a problem because just the questions from this single article, I think we can easily eat up an hour, which is the whole interview. But I still have to ask some questions. So one is that you preface the thesis by saying that you are a believer in agentic AI, right? So that's even an interesting thing, that at this stage you need to be a believer in it, because we haven't really, we're seeing some examples, right? But there are also a bunch of concerns about that. We can list, a long list under each. But, is this going to be the real thing? Is agentic AI the bet that people should make? So can you just, say a few more sentences around that of why you already mentioned it because they are replicating business processes, but maybe just unpack this a little bit, because I know that there are a lot of even CEOs listening to this who might not be data experts, but they're like, hey, agentic AI, should we make that bet? And they want to hear from someone who understands business realities, who understands market forces, who understand decision making from all kinds of stakeholders, including your investors and customers and internal stakeholders, who can say that, hey, this is a trend that will materialize, right? What is your case for that?
Yes, no, this is definitely the trend. There is no question, right? And I said this. I do believe it's close to the process, right? So if you think about, there are so many manual, time-consuming processes are happening across all businesses, right? So, and this could be technical process. This could be, personal kind of, process, right? So this could be at the process actually between systems, because our systems have been built in isolation, right? So there is one system directly customer experience, another one might be R&D, right? But systems do not talk to each other, right? So agentic AI can actually cover this space to really help to process to happen much faster, right? So I think the first application of agentic, which is so obvious, and this is something which I mentioned in an article, and people actually started commenting, and I started adding comments on this. So this is about the customer journey, like a lead generation, right? So like, for example, if we look into like a space now, there are already agents who can actually help you to do the market research. It's kind of easy, right? Because the Gen AI was built based on open data, and you can generate a lot of ideas about the leads, about the people, about the prospects, and everything, right? So this is obvious, but now we want to move into the funnel, right? So we need to move to the funnel, and we now enter in the kind of company proprietary information, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the tricky part, right? So the first part, the lead generation, you can pretty much do through agentic, the general type of models, right? So LLMs, right? But when you enter the company proprietary information, then these agents actually have to be trained on the company information, right? So the Gen AI models, they have been not trained on company information, right? So you now train on the company information. And the early results, I had a lot of conversations with people actually from the academia who train in this type of models. So they still do not have a full pass of the training, the full scalability of the model on really complex enterprise queries or complex processes, right? So you still need to break your process really short kind of cycles, right? So this is where you enter enterprise proprietary space, right? So again, the shorter you break, is better performance of your agent is going to be, right?
Mm.
So, and as shorter you identify, specific process, like for example, I want to my agent actually, um, let's say, to summarize information coming from my CRM. I mean, this is possible, right? But you need to be like really, really narrow in your task to start from, right? Maybe a year from now, maybe actually months, who knows, right? We're going to be able to write more complex type of agents inside, right? But now we still have a limitation of the technology, right? So yeah. So my key point about the agents, I do believe that staying close to the process, to the task, so this gives me the hope that this technology is going to stay with us. Give you analogy from my past experience working in a digital first industry, publishing. So when we have been observing early trend in social, right? So when like Facebook didn't ever exist. I mean, they existed, they just came basically, right?
Hmm.
And as an analytics person, I remember I was looking at numbers and I was like, you know what? Numbers don't show us that it's going to be like a big trend, right?
Hmm.
And I remember having a conversation with like our editorial team at Wall Street Journal, and we have been talking about the behavioral side, right? And we put it the big bets into social, into the mobile activation. So Wall Street Journal actually became like almost like a number one activated like an Apple, right?
Hmm.
And because we put it into behavioral. So we put it back into behavioral and invested money into behavioral, right? So this is where I think the agents are, they're going to address some behavioral, like a messy gaps, which we have. And this is where I would love to put my big bet. The same as
Hmm.
I did, before on social, for example.
So because on social, like you bet it on behavioral science, like you said that okay, that
Yeah.
will be predictive, right? And I remember we're not gonna get into that specifically, but I remember when
Yeah.
I was in London, I think it was 2019, and you remember the Cambridge Analytica
Yes.
event.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so it's so funny that we had an event in London just when that happened, and the head of analytics at the Cambridge Analytica was just between jobs, and I told him, "Hey, do you just want to come to the event to like talk to the executives?" And he did, right? So we were like, "This is like when it was headlines." So it was so funny, and that was actually a bet on behavioral science, and that was actually one of the most like
Absolutely.
weaponized. Not even like I don't even mean it necessarily in a negative context. Just objectively, it was like leveraged. This
Yeah.
that was like big data, machine learning type of application with very conclusive results.
Yeah, really conclusive results, right? But also think about the behavioral of the this is wonderful phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which we have, right? So let me tell the story, which is actually can highlight into agentic as well, right? If we think about agentic, right? So let's say you are, I don't know, the patient with diabetes, right? So how many diabetes apps you have on this device? Right? So I mean, it's a question of the behavioral question, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when this device came in place, many companies jumped to build the diabetes app. I'm talking about healthcare, right? So and then Pfizer has it, Glaxo has it, like everybody have it, Novo Nordisk have it, right? So what happened later? Nobody using them, but
Mm-hmm.
diabetes as a disease became integrated into life science applications, right? So when you think about behavioral, like for your agent, right, you cannot just build the agent on your own, right? So you need to put it where, like where the action is happening, right? So let's
Mm-hmm.
action is happening into your Salesforce platform, right? So this is where agents should be sitting. So taking the agent outside and creating like an imagination process is not going to work, right? So the science of the model experience, social experience is showing up, that it's not going to work unless you really closely into the process.
This is also fascinating to me because there's this bigger cultural conversation around AI. And I often say that there was a funny kind of sleight of hand that happened with what we call AI. Because if you spoke to someone in the 80s and we talked about artificial intelligence, actually what we meant by today's language was artificial general intelligence, right?
Yeah.
So right now what we call AI is different. It's like more like a, again, oversimplified because that's the only way you can talk about these things, but it's essentially kind of a one-dimensional or definitely restricted in its
Yeah.
scope, almost like a guessing machine, and it actually generates outputs based on best guesses, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to underplay the significance of the technology because it's absolutely, like, LLMs are amazing, right? But they are not these individual, even when we say agent, that just means that someone has agency, right? But it doesn't mean that it has the facilities of an actual human being. I just heard an interview, and one of the famous directors who directed, Zack Snyder, who directed Justice League and all that, they were asking him about, what do you think will happen with cinema with AI? What will be the effect of it? And he said, yeah, but that's amazing, because he's like one of those guys that he loves to bring like these sci-fi visions on the screen and uses heavily digital processes. Everything is on the table for him, right? And he said that it's amazing, it's awesome, but he doesn't think that it will have the kind of effect that people think it will, because like an AI would be able to assess and replicate a process that works. And he said that no one knows what the process is for making a movie work. He said that there are singular elements, but sometimes the magic is there, sometimes the magic is not there, and we don't know why that happens or not. So there's nothing for the machine to replicate, which I found to be like a fascinating concept, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I fully agree, actually, right? So you just said the truth, right? So this is why I'm saying is like breaking into the smaller kind of pieces, right? Because you cannot replicate the entire process, right? I mean, you technically cannot replicate it. Plus, business processes, they have been, created quite often in a messy way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also they created an isolated way, right? So behavioral side is much bigger than technology, to be honest, right? And we have been learning this with digital transformation. We have been learning this with analytics, right? And I think we're going to learn with AI in a much bigger way, the behavioral.
And I still have questions around this whole, even layers of this article, because I found this also fascinating. The systems are not talking to each other, but then, agents can. And then supposes the question that if we, have these processes, and now the human, like the need for the human in the process is still there, but it's different. So what do you think, this just like a side question, because I'm genuinely interested, that we've just lived through the whole data science is the sexiest profession of the 21st century decade, right? It had its decade, I would say, maybe not even a full decade. But now that's not the talk of the town. That's right now you need to be an AI engineer, and there are overlaps. But how do you see the workforce? I know it's an impossible question to ask, but what would be your guess on how this landscape will look like in 5 to 10 years? What will be like the hot profession, and where would you advise some people in the space, maybe already leaders, maybe up and coming leaders, to make their bets?
So I think the best profession is always going to be the profession which solves real problems, right? So, and if we look into the data science, I actually did have this argument, even like in like Johnson, like 5 years ago, we talked about data science to become a commodity, right? So commodity, which means that, yes, you can replicate it, right? So this is becoming kind of the supportive process. I mean, data science is still needed, right? So machine learning, this is the data science, right? But I do believe what actually is going to be something which doesn't have age, it's actually the business knowledge, right? So business knowledge, if you really understanding how the customer sales process is working, and you can supplement this process with AI, supplement with agents, so this is golden, right?
Mm-hmm.
So building the agent itself separated, or building like your sales in completely isolation from technology, so this should not be happening, right? So the gap is actually getting quite of like wider in this area, which I don't like calling literacy, I call it fluency. So
Hmm.
fluency for me has a leadership aspect, right? So leadership aspect is actually having your mindset, skill set, your kind of language, and plus leadership to make certain decisions, to call out decisions, right? So the gap is actually getting bigger and bigger because we have absolutely talented people who are in colleges now and have been recently graduated in the technology space, right? And they're so hungry to get their hands dirty and start, building the agents and like doing all of everything, right? But what they do not have the background of the business processes, right? And people who are in the business processes, they so stuck in business processes, they don't even have time to talk to these people and kind of, close this gap, right? And as more technology is advancing, the bigger gap is becoming, right?
Hmm.
So I have been waiting for quite a long time because I had the bet saying that technology and business is going to merge at one point. Uh, I don't see this yet, but this is the most critical, right?
Hmm.
Because it's getting, the gap is getting big, right? So to people who are building these new technologies and get excited to build more and more, so my advice would be do it, make money, right? I'm honest. The same example is this diabetes apps, right? So how many people made money on diabetes apps? Great, they make great money. I know businesses, multi-million businesses actually, who made business just on building applications, which 5 years later became absolutely nonsense. Nobody using them, and that's it. But they made money, right? So yeah, you can definitely do it, right? But if you want to truly go ahead and step up on something special, we need to think about like Uber have been thinking, right? So you have to think about like what exact problem am I gonna solve, right? And this is where you need to find your co-founder, your partner, whatever, with somebody who really understands the business processes, right? So you can make a quick money or you can make a much bigger money, right? So this would be my bet, right? But to your point is, I would love to see that business and technology gets closer, but I'm not optimistic, to be honest. Not
Hmm.
optimistic even from the previous trends.
And it's a really keen observation, uh, in my opinion, that the people who are most caught up in those dysfunctional slash toxic slash overburdening business processes have the least amount of time to actually talk to the
Yes,
people who could change it, right? And this is just
yes,
honestly, this is like just one of those realities that there's. I'm not saying that we can't do anything about, but it's always true. It's almost like the poor are always with us kind of statement, you know. So and that's interesting because it does have like a significant impact on how these solutions are developed. And then this is, I sent you a note today, or actually yesterday, like about how we can even talk about these different narratives and different storylines of what's being communicated between different stakeholders, and then the big decisions are made based on that. Like for example, the C-level or the executives talking to vendors, that has like a trickle down effect on the rest of the organization, and also the future of how these so, because the money moves a certain way because of that, right? And there will always
yes.
be
No,
like a disconnect.
absolutely. And you can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So this is fascinating to me, and maybe we can before we unpack the thesis too. I would just love to go through, because you mentioned a few times your experience at certain companies without getting into too much detail, because on your resume there's definitely a lot of detail that we could unpack. But I would just be interested to hear, like, how did you get into analytics and digital transformation to begin with, and if you don't mind just walking us through some of the major steps of your career. And I'm sure that that thread about the similarity between the AI revolution and digital transformation will naturally come out in more detail as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I went really interesting way. So basically, I do have my master in engineering, computer science. And when I was graduating with my honors degree, I realized that I'm maybe not so much interested to actually be like an engineer, right? But we did get really interesting classes in my last year of the college, which was actually about how you commercialize the technology. So how you do the marketing of technology. And and I got so much excited. So I got so much excited that you can actually, commercialize the technology. And I got my PhD in economics on a topic which defined my entire career because my topic was basically about building information system to support commercial decisions, right? And I'm looking at my dissertation saying, "Oh my God, I never knew this is what is going to happen," right? And this was the time when basically Soviet Union collapsed, and was about like 10 years after the Soviet Union collapsed, right? But you can imagine how big was the market opportunity, because companies who have been operating in a government kind of dictate, right? So now they became like open to the market, and they had no clue how you can find your customers, how you price your product,
How
how
to
you.
compete.
Yes, absolutely, how to compete, right?
Mhm.
So basically, I have been owning my own consultancy, and I have been working with the companies, international companies, who really wanted to enter this new market, but they had no clue, like, who are the customers, how to segment them. And they also have been hungry to buy some companies, right? So to buy some companies so they can establish, right? So this is how I started in analytics, right? So I started actually analyzing, and some fascinating work I did. As an example, the Canadian Association of the Small Businesses, they established representation like back in Russia, and they invited me to write the pricing guidance for the small businesses, how you establish the price, right? And I remember writing like a 7 models. Actually, this is how you look at your price, and yeah, so
I was
this
actually wondering when I looked at your
yeah,
background, because I live in Canada now, right, in Vancouver, and I saw that, yeah, you work for the Canadian Business Strategy Association between 95 and 98. I'm like,
yeah,
I want to
yeah,
ask you about that. How did that happen?
yeah. So this, I mean, this is just again like a small example, right?
Mm.
But basically how I started, right? So we moved to United States in 2000. So I followed my husband because he wanted to realize his dream. He was working like in the technology, right? And you can say that technology definitely the most developed in United States, right? And moving to United States, right from moving, I was actually hired for the Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones, in a completely new business. The business which was the digital business. So the Wall Street Journal went into digital, wallstreetjournal.com, right? And I remember my interviews, and I was actually asking later on, guys, why did you hire me, right? So like, why did you hire somebody who just came to the country, right? And the answer was really interesting because they said, we had no clue what to do, right? But you had such an attitude of like, we're going to figure out how to do it, right? So, and this is what it is, right? Because again, we had no idea how to manage the data. We had no idea how to collect the digital data, right? So imagine that you run in the real-time publication, right? But your data collection is 24 hours behind. And you
Hmm.
also need to pray you're going to get this data, because there is a reason maybe you're not going to get this 24 hours. You can get it 48 hours, right? So what does it mean being real-time business if you run in 42 hours, right? So this gave me actually a lot of experiences, how to find the solution if solution doesn't exist, right? So like, for example, we have been the customer number 6 for Adobe for digital analytics, right? So like, if you customer number 6, you have a seat at the table and you can actually change the product, right? So you can come to your vendor and say, you know what, I want to do the behavioral targeting, which actually happens, right? And vendor is going to tell you like, sorry, we don't do this business. And you convince them to do it, right? So, and later on, it's becoming actually one of the biggest provider in behavioral sciences, right? So I'm kind of had a chance and early in my journey to create which didn't exist before, right? And this was like a first like 10 years like working in the United States. So the later I saw opportunity is other industries started digitizing. So the healthcare was obvious one, right? So me being in New Jersey, around my house, 10 headquarters of big pharmaceutical companies, right? So like literally like 10, 15 minutes from my house, I can go to any big, pharmaceutical company, right? But, getting into pharmaceutical business, healthcare business, um, they're not going to accept you, right? So like you come in as a senior leader, like, oh, you have no idea about the healthcare, right? So I took a leap actually going into the digital agency, the agency which have been working with pharmaceutical clients, right? And this gave me an idea of to understand what clients are asking for, right? So this is how I quickly learned about, pharmaceutical, right? And moved into healthcare, which I spent like another more than 15 years in different capacities, from the pure pharma, the medical devices, consumer health, global and local, right? So even like my journey at Denon, it is related to healthcare because like nobody knows that Denon actually has a quite a big business, especially in Europe, which is related to the baby formula or related to some food, which is by prescription only, right? So for people who have a like cancer or have a diabetes or like any type of diseases, right? So yes, and now into manufacturing, old school manufacturing, which does give me a little bit kind of deja vu because I'm remembering some old journeys into back like in 2015, like 10 years ago, right? Because traditional manufacturing is definitely behind in digitization,
Oh yeah.
right? Yeah, and there are reasons why they're behind, right? Because they have so many factories, they have a lot of processes running, right? So, this does represent a big opportunity going forward as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I know because we some of the companies that we've been working with over the past couple of years in North America. Because let's say I worked between let's say 2015 and 2019, mainly in Europe, and then North America for the other half. And like companies like Caterpillar or Honeywell, right? They
Yeah,
are on a huge
yeah,
journey of digital transformation. And I know that also in the case of Caterpillar, we were talking about 100-year-old company. So its digital transformation and AI transformation is nothing short of historical scales. So this kind of reminds me of when, as you told the story, I found it fascinating that I mean they needed someone who has experience under quote unquote wartime conditions where you just have to get the results and things will not be available.
yes,
It's
exactly. And
because
then you go and you find how to do it, right? So
and
because it's like you have you have to better target your customers, right? Okay, what is solution? There's no technology. Okay, how you can go around.
yeah, and I love it how, this is the digitization of the Wall Street Journal. If you talk about a historical newspaper where you basically associate the brand with the smell of the paper and
Yeah,
the whole the distribution of the handheld, people in suits reading it next to a coffee, with
yeah,
and then you need to digitize this and
yeah,
it was I just love the whole story, and then also what you said about Adobe, right? I mean, obviously, it's funny that they will not say that. Oh, well, look, a sixth customer, the small brand that you might have heard of, the Wall Street Journal, they won this functionality, so
yeah.
you can actually really make an impact and make a splash that way. And
I would add actually, Les, into like Wall Street Journal. You know who was actually the biggest advocate for all of this development? This was actually the editor. So Bill Grushkin was the editor at that time.
oh wow,
We have been. I remember we have been running like a monthly competition. Who is using analytics, right? And he had a 400 people like editorial team, right? So Bill was the number one. So he was ahead of me, right? So he beated me in using the data, right? So yes, I remember is because this is an attitude we had, right? So and I remember coming into the office which we had on Sixth Avenue. So you come into office and this is like 6 floors and you have a media running, right? So you have a television real-time recording, right? You go on TV, right? You go from the meeting room, right? So, but energy was like this real-time energy. It's difficult to explain businesses who are not working the real time,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's like, this actually created a lot of foundation in my personal leadership and my personal thinking is how you find solution for the problem, right? And how you do it much quicker, right? And how you can actually make this work in real time, right? So it's yeah. So Bill published my article in Wall Street Journal. So
Really?
yes, exactly. So he was so much appreciated for the work that I do have my personal article at Wall Street Journal.
That's fascinating. And it's also so cool to see that, sometimes that person is required who kind of like is the visionary leader, who's really serious about their sphere of ownership. And, I mean, we're talking
Yes.
about the editor of the Wall Street Journal. And basically the Wall Street Journal pioneered this. And why would you and also as you were talking, by the way, for me it's fascinating to see that you were at companies like Johnson and Johnson, and then some of these household names like Nestle and Danone, which are again like these huge companies. I mean, all of them are like 100 years old, right?
Yes.
and,
Yep.
and yeah.
Yeah, all of them 100 years old, right? But I think what is interesting, all of these companies, they have been realizing that you need to create environment for like innovation and differentiation, right? So as an example, when I came to Johnson and Johnson, right? So I came as a leader of the small, kind of like a center of excellence global group, right? And it took us 5 years to expand this and bring all the regions, bring all the countries kind of together, right? So this is not like a one day of journey, right? So basically what these companies have been doing, and Johnson is actually super innovative. They ahead of many like other companies in the processes, right? So I definitely have a lot of respect for them, how much they can build on AI, because they actually simplified a lot of processes, right? So, and they have been giving us the space to grow, right? So when you get the space to grow and you get support from the CIO, you get the support from CMO, right? From Chief Customer Officer, right? So these are your key sponsors and executive officer, right? So then you can actually grow something, right? So, so this was definitely, I would say Johnson was one of the best experiences for me. Like one of the business which I have been managing at Johnson was actually the medical devices and the vision care, right? So the vision basically, right? At one point of the time, if you go to like a vision, Johnson Vision, you can see that they have been saying, we are the data company. Can you,
Wow.
this was right on the homepage, right on the website, like we are the data company, right? So why this was happening? Because we have been running the program which we call the vision experience, right? Vision experience, which means that how you can connect the patient, the doctor, and the whole ecosystem of the providers around, right? So how you create this experience, right? And we have been launching this program like across like 7 markets, right? So US is a big market, but Japan is also a big market because vision is a big problem in Japan. But Europe, so Russia was actually one of the markets. And the most exciting for me was actually not just to build the technology, build the data around, right? But I was personally leading some literacy program, not for Johnson Johnson, but for the partners, right? Because we have been providing, let's say, the tools to the doctors, but doctors had no idea how to use them,
Yeah.
right? So I was actually leading the trainings, coming to the doctor kind of, forums and explaining them, this is how you can benefit from what we given to you, right? And giving them examples like how they can run the business differently, right? So definitely a lot of great examples. Example is also like one which close to my heart is actually how to sell the data governance, right? So yeah, my sell to data governance is show the value first, right? So when I showed actually saying, here is 123 million, you actually don't know about your like customer allocation, right? So this was like a cell like this, right? So you're saying like, okay, 123, let me break this out, right? And you can see that's, executive officer and like president of the division saying like, really? It's like, yeah, because the systems don't talk to each other, right? So if we give a discount in one system, we can actually give in another one and another one. This adds up, and now you actually kind of gave 23 million of discounts you don't even know about, right? So, these are the way how I have been always, selling this challenging topic of data governance.
Ooh, this is so fun. And I wanted to ask you about data governance, even on the back of the article, because
Yeah.
you said that it will change data governance. Before we jump into that, I just wrote this down. And by the way, for this conversation, I usually keep everything on one page. I'm already almost full on the second page of my notes. So that's fascinating because I know that actually Johnson & Johnson just, I don't know, like, because they used to be a client in London, and
Yeah.
then they went from being the Johnson & Johnson that we kind of know and associate, with the baby and all that. That's
Yeah.
actually the consumer arm, and then they actually became like a medical devices
Yes.
company ultimately, right? And what was, because this is what fascinates me as I'm watching this, these transformations unfold. So I actually started with digital transformation when I entered into this, quote unquote data driven space. So I mentioned to you that Professor Ralph Strauss, who was the SVP of digital transformation at Volkswagen, my first project in the London business team was with him, actually working with Fortune 500 executives working on their digital transformation, right? And I know that a huge part of it was, what is the narrative? What is that story that everyone can kind of buy into that will galvanize and drive that transformation? So, for example, when you were at J&J, I think that was around like 2017, 2019, right? Do you remember what was that kind of transformation narrative that was not necessarily just specific to Johnson & Johnson, but in that space in which Johnson & Johnson operated? What moved the needle for actually getting things
Yeah.
done?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in Johnson Johnson, I have been working with two kind of parts of the business. One is a consumer health, and this is the business you're talking about, the Kinvu, now a separate business, right? And then the medical devices business, specifically like a vision type of business, and some other like diabetes devices, right? So in a space of the devices, the message was about the connected journey, right? So how you connect the journey of your patient, right? So then you can actually speed up the journey, you can speed up the adoption, right? So for example, if you think about the contact lenses, um, there are multiple breaking points in the journey, right? So the biggest breaking point is even why people don't consider the contacts, because this might be much easier to use, right? So, but there are a lot of barriers, right? So then another like breaking points are happening, right? And we were not able to connect like entire journey basically, right? So this was the force behind the transformation, and this is why we called it vision experience, right? So this is one. On the consumer health, there are several trends have been happening. So one trend is actually about the mega brands, right? So what does it mean, mega brand? So mega brand, if you have the sales over 1 billion, right? So something like, for example, Tylenol, something like Neutrogena, right? So these are big, mega global brands, right? But the brand execution was not consistent, right? So if you like in Japan, you're not going to be recognized this is Tylenol, right? So and this doesn't help, right? So you don't have this like a global recognition of the brand. So the focus was actually to drive the mega brands, right? And have a consistent execution. So this consistent execution requires the data, requires creative have to be done, experience, customer journey, like everything have to be kind of done differently, right? So this is one. The second trend is it's called actually revenue growth management, and you're going to see this aspect because revenue growth management means that you have to look holistically between your price, your assortment, your customer execution, right? Your supply chain. You cannot look this separately. They have to be looked into ecosystem, right? Because margins are usually much smaller in a consumer businesses and comparing to pharmaceutical or medical devices, right? So you have to tightly manage all of this, all levels together, right? So and you can see it's actually quite a popular concept, revenue growth management, right? So this was the kind of the second biggest driving post, right? So from the marketing, I mean, all consumer packaged goods, these are marketing machines, mega brand, right? And on the customer side, so this is you have a revenue growth management, and you actually look is how you drive your investments, right? Where you invest into assortment, where you invest into, basically on your product and other stuff, and where you invest into your customers, right? So this is what have been driving this transformation. So it's still kind of here, right? So
Mm.
what I see that mega brands are becoming less relevant.
Hmm.
Right. I think after the COVID, a lot of kind of localized brands came. So the message are becoming more like, local, right? But companies still want to drive the global execution, right? Because, they cannot sacrifice margins and the prices are growing, right? So, they're going to eat your money if you're not going to be doing, execution, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I did have really interesting some conversations with the executives, right? So then for me it was it's really important to look like what is your core business, right? So like for consumer packaged goods, your core business is marketing, right? So
Hmm.
you market brands, right? So your biggest value is going to come from the brands, right? So if you in manufacturing business, like, okay, your core business is actually making the product, right? So and you have to drive the value around making the product, right? So if you're in pharmaceutical business, again, your business is the product, right? So if you don't have a pipeline, you don't have a pipeline,
Hmm.
right? So and by the way is so this is where the biggest AI opportunity come, right? So your biggest AI opportunity is going to be linked to in which business you are, right? So you might argue and say like, oh, Elena, does it mean that supply chain for manufacturing is not kind of relevant? So in this case, supply chain is a commodity. You not necessarily need to buy or to build your home solution in supply chain. You can buy them, right? But what you cannot buy, your IP. Your IP is a creation of the product, right? So your IP is a creation of the brand. This is your IP, right? So this is where you put your money to build the I. Really hard, right? So this is why we all sacrificing, right? But this is where the future is going to come. If you invest into your core business, like investing into supplementing functions, it's great, but you not necessarily have to build custom stuff.
Hmm. It's fascinating how the assumption is that, oh, with AI we can just kind of let go of the steering
Yeah.
wheel and everything will be run by AI, and it's kind of like the opposite. It's actually about kind of this intentional deployment and their judgment of where we're gonna do that. That's what will actually move the needle. So this is really cool, and I'm actually thinking as you speak that right now some of the projects that we're working on with a bunch of our members who are big Fortune 500 companies is to actually kind of articulate that core transformation narrative behind the application of digital and data and AI that actually appeals to all the relevant stakeholders in the conversation. Because a company itself, if you think about it, a company, the word means that it's a collective of
Yep.
individuals who, for a big company especially, they are very, very diverse. And when I say diverse, I mean that, tens of, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. And you kind of need a narrative that can connect everyone, that can align all these different perspectives, and not even just within the company, but think about the investors and the shareholders and the
Yep.
and the market. So some of the projects that we're working on is to kind of bring the right people to the table from across the organization, articulate a good story, and actually bring some of those to life too. So we're bringing some cinematography teams from here in Vancouver to fly across the US. It's purely something that just kind of naturally emerged as something that we do because it's needed, right? So can you just speak to this a little bit, like the whole idea of, so I mean, we are the data storytellers. I would be,
Yep. Yep.
I need to ask the question that how important do you think storytelling is in this? And not just the superficial kind of, stories are important. I know that, a lot of people talk about this, but, you're someone who has seen this from the quote unquote, the belly of the beast, and you have, I think, really, really incisive and insightful takes on this. So how do you see this whole idea of storytelling and why it's important, and how that shaped your career?
Yes, so I think the storyteller is so like storytelling is so important, right? So what I have been always looking into before I tell the story, I would love to invest my time seeing how people are really working, right? Because I do believe that the language of the story have to be relevant to what people understand, right? So if my key stakeholder, let's say chief marketing officer, right? So I need to understand how the brand structure is working. I need to understand how they're spending time with the agency and actually go together with them and visit the agency, right? So, so really like observing first. I would observe first, and then the language is going to become the language they speak, right? So you basically speak the brand language. You don't speak AI language, right? You don't speak like a manufacturing language. You actually speak the language which related to the work people are doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big believer in observing experiences, right? So like, sitting together with, let's say, a supply chain senior director, right? Who is opening his engineering computer and showing me that he starts his day from downloading 150 files, right? And I'm asking him like, why you do this? And he was like, because I don't know which one is right. And I was like, okay, great, right? So great insight for me, right? So person doesn't know which one is right, right? But he's trying to figure out, okay, like what next you do? Okay, I'm taking this and I'm building my Access database. Okay, sounds great. But like we created the dashboard for you. Like, why do you need this dashboard? Oh, I actually don't need the dashboard. I need the data behind the dashboard, right? So unless you have this really deep, engaging conversation and almost like a follow entire day of this person, um, you don't know what story you're going to build, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you know what a story to build, right? Because if I know this senior director supply chain story, right? So I come back to him and say, you know what, look, this is what I'm going to do for you, right? So now imagine that you don't need to get this 150 files anymore, right? So, and actually they're going to come to your place automatically. You're actually going to see insights of this, and not you're not you should not be spending your time like doing, right? So when you break this into like pieces, and this is going to be your journey, right? And this is your accountability, my accountability. um I mean, rarely, I mean, I honestly cannot even call the moment when I was not getting yes I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I honestly was getting more I wanted than less than I don't want it, right? So I mean, usually when the year starts, and the data team can or analytics team say like, oh, you know what, how much budget we have? Oh, we don't have enough budget. Can we get more budget? I was like, don't worry, we're gonna get more than you need. So yeah, so basically you do need to get into this like deep understanding and deep conversations.
Mm-hmm. And this is also interesting how those are the quality of your questions and the quality of your observations and the quality of your intuition of where to press in that actually creates the value, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering when we'll get to the point where AI would be able to ask those questions. I'm kind of a skeptic on that front, right? Like how that would even look like, because someone like we talked about before, like, okay, how are the data teams transforming, right? But I'm just kind of seeing that human touch is almost instrumental in the sense that the fact that there's a human being sitting there and asking the questions is almost like irreplaceable.
I think it's replaceable, to be honest. I mean,
Mm.
not fully replaceable, right? So you can train the model. So I give you my little secret. I'm actually building some agents myself. So we
Okay.
actually, right. So and one agent I'm actually thinking about is actually really how to help people to formulate the business problem, so then the data teams can actually act on it, right? Because as I'm saying, the gap is quite a big between how business explain, how data team takes the ask, right? Lost in translation, people speaking different languages, right? So how to create actually this translation agent, which can help people to speak the better language, right?
It's
So
really
I,
cool.
I do believe this is possible. Absolutely.
This is amazing, and this would be a perfect example that, if that happens, I'd love to actually see how that works. And
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'll give you an access as soon as I have it.
I
Yes.
love it. I absolutely love it. And now that you mention it, actually, it is true that you can definitely have kind of like a sequence of questions that with the right feedback gets you the right answer.
So the methodology is actually pretty well developed, right? So back in Johnson Johnson, we developed the methodology which we called rapid value realization, right? So I mean, I love the words rapid value realization, right? So you see where I'm going, right? So basically, we have been engaging with our stakeholders in a conversation when nobody is allowed to talk about solution. No, we're not talking about this, right? And this is hard, right? Because you imagine you have like a sales team like sitting with you, right? And they like, we want this dashboard. We want this, retention model, whatever it is. And it was like, no, you're not allowed to talk about what you want in a solution. We talk about like how your day looks like, right? And this is hard, right? But we developed a series of exercises. There is like 7 different exercises, how to take people through imagination, basically, right? So I'm trying kind of to digitize this thinking through the agent. It's almost like think about how the future gonna look like, right? In this type of workshops, we actually have been asking people to draw the picture, and people say like, no, I cannot draw. I don't know how to do it. No, you should, right? But the next exercise, ask your neighbor to explain what did you drive. I mean, like, what do you have on the picture, right? And it's like, you can start seeing the gaps in engagement, right? So you can start seeing how people think differently, and this is good, right? But at the end of 2 days, they have to understand why they're not able to build a solution, right? So I had situations because I was demanding the executives to come to this meeting, right? And the regional VP of sales was like, I don't have time, like, you taking my 2 days, you're gonna waste my time, right? But end of 2 days, I had situations when people have been saying is like, you know what? This was the best because I know we don't need a dashboard. I was like, I'm so happy you don't need it, right? Because there is a different kind of issue we have to solve, right? So I do believe, I mean, there are a lot of good methodologies already, right? So if you take Agile, right? So Agile actually has a lot of kind of, thinking in terms of how you create the products, how you create the services, right? But it was used mostly by technical teams. It was not kind of, brought into the full business context, right? So I think good methodologies which agents can digitize.
This is fascinating to me because one of the biggest problems that kind of emerged over the past 10 years that I see, especially with data teams and BI teams and analytics teams, is often becoming the report vending machine, as we kind of coined it. And to eliminate that problem, and especially how to eliminate the bottleneck that emerges from the teams being overburdened and being in this constant reactive state, not being able to focus on the strategic priorities and what matters. Getting them out of that is almost like a therapeutic process, where
it's a therapeutic, right? But also, Lars, is like, here is a tricky question: is what is the most popular request with all dashboards? Just you guess.
I guess give me my sales, I imagine.
Yeah, so the most popular request, can I download this to Excel?
Oh.
No, I'm not joking, 99%. So can I download this Excel, right? So, but you need to go deeper and understand why. Like, why are you asking me for this feature, right? So then you can actually uncover the real story of all these dashboards, right? So in the majority of the cases, people are trying to create the dashboard because they want somebody to integrate data for them. So they literally want not a dashboard. They don't care about dashboard. They need access to data. Right? So this is why the majority of dashboards are not used. And what people doing, they download them to Excel to do their own analysis or enhance with the data they personally have, hoarding on personal computers or getting from the customers or whatever it is, right? Because, they actually need this type of self-service. They actually need to kind of feel the ownership, right? So, but they don't know how to do it, right? So this is why I'm excited actually about technologies like Snowflake or Databricks. These are guys go in with this data product type of thinking. They actually go into this deep desire of, I want to own it, but I want to understand it, right? So give me the simple way to look into this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is why capitalization of Databricks are going through the roof, right? Or Snowflake, for example.
Actually, that's one question I wanted to ask you about. That with these big companies like Snowflake and Databricks, those are some of the providers, but then you also have the big consultancies that I know, because all of our Fortune 500 clients work with those companies in
Yep.
some capacity. How do you see those spaces changing and shifting amidst this whole AI revolution? How do you see the impact? Because I'm seeing a lot of like reframing in what are even the core propositions. Let's say a big consultancy, right? That kind of changed over the years. And Snowflake has been around for a while now, right? Or companies like Salesforce, Databricks, a little bit of a newer player, but still. So how do you see that?
So I think the space is going to continue, development, right? So I do see, and this is actually coming from the recent announcements, which we see in, Snowflake or Databricks, right? So we see actually that the traditional, like a data warehouse, right? So it needs to be the part of the AI infrastructure, right? So you cannot kind of separate two of this, right? So you basically, let's say if you get into Snowflake, so they get a Databricks, you automatically get AI on whatever assets you're going to build, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is definitely obvious trend, right? So I think consultancy. I mean, if you talk about, let's say like strategic consultancies, right? So strategic consultancies, they're still going to be relevant, right? But I think they need to help to close the gap between the business and technology, right? So, for example, everybody want to build the data product. So, data product is not technical concept. It's not. It's a business concept, right? So, consultancies actually can help to understand what is the business product is, right? And sitting together with the business and technology leaders and help to close this gap, right? So I think this is from strategic consultancy. So if we talk about the consultancy, traditional software development services, right? So I was in India a couple months ago and meeting quite a lot of different providers, right? So India is struggling right now because now the cost of outsourcing, it's actually more expensive than you're going to build your AI agent, for example, right? So, but we do still need, people, right? But we probably need people to have in a different capacity, right? So all of this offshore type of shops, they have been focusing on a cost model. They not necessarily have been focusing on a reusable components model, right? And what I believe who is going to win in this is actually who is going to have reusable components models, right? So who is going to have the partnerships with key big players, like Snowflakes, whatever, right? Plus, who is going to own the processes. So, and recent acquisition, the Capgemini actually was announced a couple of weeks ago. They acquired the company who is actually owning call centers. So it's basically the software now integrate with call centers. You can start building agents and everything like crazy, right? So I think we're going to see more type of acquisitions when basically the software companies, software consultancies are acquiring the companies who are, focusing on processes.
Yeah, it's interesting because with the podcast, when we started doing it, we're only talking mainly with executives on the front lines, right? But I know that the people who connect with me on LinkedIn reaching out, hey, I love the podcast, often are from these big, Snowflake and Databricks, and also the big four as well. So they are listening and they're trying to figure out, where the space is moving, because they are becoming household names themselves, right? And another aspect of the market that's interesting to me, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but over the past 10 years, I saw some of these companies like Gartner also kind of emerge. Because also they got kind of repositioned, and all of our members and all of our clients are working with Gartner in some capacity. I always found it a very impressive company, right? How do you see that some of those market analysts and some of the market research and the Gartner type of companies, how is their role changing?
The role is changing fundamentally, and not just the Gartner. If you also take, for example, like a financial analyst on Wall Street, right? So the companies who are putting your, let's say, like a quarterly analytics for whatever directions a company taken, right? So back in June, we did our internal literacy session, which we basically got our community of people who are using the tools like OpenAI or using like a Microsoft Copilot, right? And we have been asking them to present. This was a meeting of 250 people, right? So, I mean, this is how big is an interest like in a company, right? And we also brought representation from an OpenAI to show us some developments of agents, right? And one of the agents, they actually showed us saying, I want to summarize the quarterly, not the quarter, I mean, the Wall Street report from the company over the last 3 years. And I would love to drive the conclusions where the directions of the market could be going, right? And this was done right on a call, right on a call, right? And people, you can imagine people is like, oh my God, I am like working in a strategy team. I'm, like this is my job, right? So, but I mean, it does help, right? So the role is kind of, changing. You don't need to do this manual work, right? But you really have to bring AI into your work, right? So you really have to bring AI into, whatever work, right? So yeah, to your point, we're definitely gonna see, big changes, no question, right? No question, absolutely, right? But against of like fighting AI, start using it. I mean, I'm executive, but I'm building my own agents because I mean, I love to see how they work, right? So I will love to see how they work, and because I understand the process, right? So, but many, sales leaders or, marketing or supply chain, they don't do it, right? So they still thinking is like, I love the dashboard, right? So
there's definitely an attachment there, and there are so many questions still that I took notes about here, especially areas like, okay, data governance is changing in light of your main customers / users / audience being the agents, but we might have to leave that for another session, maybe like a part 2 at some point, just because I also want to land the plane on time. I really appreciate the time that you gave our audience today, and this was a fascinating conversation. Again, probably we could explore all kinds of different angles here, but before we move on and wrap up, so what are you excited about right now? You already mentioned that you're building your own, agents. You have a newsletter. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. That what do you care about today? What are some of your projects, even the public-looking ones? What is your newsletter about? What makes you wake up in the morning?
Yeah, so the best exciting for me, and so this is what I'm looking. There are several moments. One is the people side. So the people side, I mean, this is where I'm experimenting with, the agents. I'm experimenting with a new leadership framework, which I'm going to probably announce maybe in a month, hopefully in a month, right? Because I think the people side of AI, it's so much important, right? So coming from my experience from the previous like digital transformations and everything, right? So this is that. The second, what actually excites me is how we can change the space of data and analytics, especially our own manual processes, right? So my team actually knows that, and I have been saying this in many companies. I have been saying, eat your own bread. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, you know what? You're recommending machine learning for your business. What about doing this for yourself? What about actually improving your data processes by using machine learning, right? So, and this is where my partnership with external vendors are coming, right? So I do have, I would say, the portfolio of, I am advising the portfolio of different companies who are coming to me and saying, I have this brilliant idea, but I'm not necessarily know how it's going to work in the enterprise environment. So can you help me understand if this is brilliant idea is actually going to work, right? And if it's going to work, like, what it needs to be done, right? So specifically in a data management space, specifically in technologies which people building into the space of the data observability, right? So data mastering, data, governance, right? So these are my, like interests, right? And I'm finishing my second PhD now, which is also going to be in information management and data sciences, right? So which is totally related to the field which I'm personally invested and interested.
So this just posed even more questions because, like, you doing your second PhD is not something that I expected. It does not surprise me, though. I think after today's conversation, how do you find the time to, just basically act in the capacity that you're acting in some of these, some of the leading companies in the world, doing that job, having time to, show up on the podcast and just talk about these topics, and at the same time also finish a PhD. That would be challenging for me, not only because I have 2 under 2, right, but in general, I think for
Yes.
anyone.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, is like my family is my biggest support, right? So they have been they have been supporting me always, right? And I have been supporting them, right? So my kids are big kids now. So my son is a student at McGill University right now. So my daughter's already working, right? So I have more time than you have when you have smaller kids, right? So but also I mean I'm taking my time, right? So for example, like for PhD, right, if I'm doing this full time, I maybe can do it like in 2 years, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually taking this like much longer, right? So when I have time, I kind of do it, right? But I do see my role is becoming more and more into like a fluency literacy type of space, right? And I think this is that the true like leadership, the true like a CDO type of role is moving,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I enjoy like what I'm doing. As I said, I'm now giving more than I'm receiving, right? So
Hmm.
I'm giving more, and people know this, right? So like the founders know me. The founders know that they can call me and check a quick idea, and I'll be honest. I'm gonna say, you know what, this is not never gonna work, right? Or actually say, you know what, this is great. Go deeper into it, right? So, yeah.
That makes sense. And also doing the PhD, it kind of makes sense in the way that, well, this is stuff that you're already working on anyways. If you want to do your job better, you are pushing the envelope anyways on these ideas, and you have the grounding. So I
Yep.
see absolutely why not. And I agree with you. Actually, even for me, I can tell that the uh, family is the most important element in this. That
Yep.
ultimately
Yep.
gets you to be able to succeed in the space. And look, it's been a fascinating conversation. I want to land us on the dot because I respect the time that you gave us today, and I really enjoyed the conversation, and I genuinely hope we'll have you back on the show at some point.
Absolutely, Lars. Thank you so much. I enjoyed our thought provocative questions, right? We can definitely continue the conversation on many, many topics. Thank you so
Absolutely,
much.
and then the listeners can head to LinkedIn. We'll probably leave a few show notes. And in fact, we'll leave in the show notes Elena's newsletter and that article that we talked about. I think that's a good starting point, and we'll have a few LinkedIn clips, anyways, published about this. So, Elena, again, thank you, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Lars. Thank you.